Let's review an advanced SQL query. So our data request is to pull the last sales order for each customer. So the maximum sales date for each customer. We're going to pull in all of those sales ID records. There could be multiple for each customer. Once we have that data filtered down, we're then going to be pulling in the max sales ID. So it's going to just be the one record for each customer. Let's first preview the data a little bit, get a little background, and then we'll start writing out our query. So as you can see, we have the top 5 records. So I'm going to be just pulling in one of the customer IDs. So for this one specific customer ID, I can see that here's the max date. I have another query set up where I'm pulling in all of those rows for that customer ID and for that max date. Most recent sales date, they had 3 transactions for that one customer. So we want to pull in the maximum sales ID for whatever the max sales date was for that customer. Alright, so what do we got to do? So let's come down here and start writing our query. Alright, first things first, let's connect to that database. So we'll select use and we'll select our database. We'll highlight that and you can hit F5 on your keypad to execute. So now we're in that database. From here what we'll do is we're pulling in the customer ID with the max date for each customer. So I'm going to say select from sales and I want the customer ID, and I also want let me pull the top 5 again just so you can see what I'm working with here. So I want the customer ID and I want the sales date and I want the max sales date for each customer. So I'll put in max. We'll name this as max date. And then we'll group by the customer. So this is going to be one row for each customer. So we have our query set up, select the customer ID, max sales date from sales, group by customer. So that'll give us one row for each customer. That's great. What I like to do now when I'm writing these queries is I'll kind of fine tune it down. I'll filter it down to one customer just so I can validate the data. So I'm going to just put a where statement in here, and I'm going to say where the customer ID equals this guy. I took a screenshot of this previous query we ran above, all max records, and from here what we saw was the max sales date for this customer ID was December 28. As you can see here, after running this query we have the same result, so that's good to see. Alright, so now what do we need to do? So now we need the actual maximum sales ID for each of these. Remember how, looking at this screenshot, there are 3 records. So what we now want is we want to return this maximum sales ID, this 257,900. So let's get back into alright, so to do this, what we're going to do now is we're going to create another SQL query, and we're going to actually use this one we created as a join. So I'm going to select from, and I'm going to say sales again. Call this S1. This is an alias. And then I'll say right join. This is only going to join the records that are matching. We'll call this other query we created already. We're just going to call this S2. And from here what we want to do is actually we want to pull in the customer ID. And we want to pull in the sales ID. And what we're doing here is we're going to be pulling the max sales ID. So max sales ID, create an alias, max sales ID. So we'll come back down here and create our relationship. So this is S2. So we need to just say S1.customer ID equals S2.customer ID. And S1.date equals sales date equals S2 dot date max date. We'll then do another group by our customer ID since we have an aggregate. So we'll say group by. I'm gonna run this again. Alright, so as you can see now, if we pull back up that screenshot we took, you can now see that we have our customer ID and we have the correct maximum sales ID of 257,900. So that's exactly what we want. So now we want to pull in the full sales detail record for that one transaction for each customer. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're just going to join it one more time. We're going to apply the filter to that sales ID. So I'm going to come back up to the top, and I'll say select from sales, call this S3, and we're going to then do a right join. So another join where it only pulls in the related records. So we'll group this guy, and we'll call this max cust ID. Once again, this is an alias, so you can call this whatever you want. And now we have to create our relationships. So we'll say we're going to relate this back to S3 based off the sales ID equaling the max ID. So that's going to be the max customer ID table that we just created, and max sales ID. So now it's just going to be pulling in only, for every single customer ID, it's only going to be pulling in the data from the maximum sales ID that we already filtered down, where it was the max date. So we can actually just come back up to the top now, plug in our S3 table, which is our just sales table, and we'll just select star. And from here, we can just highlight it, hit run. We have the full detailed data for that maximum record for that customer. So now all you have to do is just remove that parameter for the customer ID. We'll run it again. And as you can see, there's one record for each customer with the maximum sales ID. As you can see in the bottom right, there's 567 records. So I'm writing another query real quick just to show you that there's only 567 customers that had sales. So to do that, I'm just gonna come down to below and write another query saying select from sales. From here, I'm gonna write distinct. It's a built-in SQL function. You can then put in your field. It's only going to count the record once for each time it sees it. So we're going to say distinct, and then we're going to wrap a count function around that. And now we can run this. It's going to give us the total distinct customers from the sales table, which is 567, which is the same record count as our query above. Hopefully you learned something here. Yeah. Like and subscribe. Yo, yeah.